The ACT just announced some pretty major changes coming to this test. So we're going to go over everything that you could possibly need to know if you're planning to take the ACT within the next couple years. And as somebody who's been coaching students to consistently improve their scores by 4 or 5 points on this test for the last 6 years, and as somebody who's, taken the test like probably 10 times myself during that period of time, here's exactly what I think about all these changes. Obviously, anytime that there's big changes coming to something that's as important as the ACT, we're going to be a little bit concerned, a little bit hesitant about whatever it is that they're announcing. So you definitely want to know what's going on so that you can make the best plan for your specific situation. What you don't want to do is end up being behind the curve because of these new changes and end up missing out on opportunities in terms of getting into the best colleges and earning the most scholarships because you didn't know that there was something new going on with the test. And so first and most importantly, we have to go over when these changes are taking place. And the ACT didn't do a great job of making this clear in their initial announcement, but we now have a much better idea of the exact timelines. So right now it's about September of 2024, and the test is going to stay the exact same all the way up until April of 2025. And at that point, there will be the option to take the new version of the test, but the new version of the test will not be mandatory. You'll still have the option to take the old one as well for a few months. So starting in April of 2025, the new version of the test will be available to take online, or you can take the old version, this version that everyone's taking right now, still on paper. And then by September of 2025, you'll no longer have the option to take the old test. You'll have to take the new version of the test, and you can do that either on paper or in the online format. So you're never going to be forced to take the online version of the test. You will always at all points in time have the option for the paper and pencil version. It's just that by September of 2025, it's going to be the new version of the test with the couple changes that they're making. And so what are the mandatory changes that are coming in September of 2025? And the first change is that the test is becoming a little bit shorter and it's giving you a little bit more time per question. The ACT has always been known as kind of the time crunch test, where it's always a bit of a rush to get through each section. And the ACT knows this, so they're making it so that you have a little bit more time per question, and then they're shortening the test overall. The changes, though, are not that drastic in terms of the total time per question. On the math section right now, you have 1 minute per question on average, and I think they're bumping that up to about 1 minute and 7 seconds per question going forward. So overall, there's not like a massive change that's coming to the amount of time per question. They're just shortening the overall length of the sections a little bit. And the next change is that the science section is becoming optional. So if you don't want to take the science section when you sign up to take the ACT, then you can opt out of that section and just take the math, the English, and the reading sections. But it's really important to understand here that we don't actually really know how colleges will look at this. So the ACT can say that the science section is optional, but if colleges are still going to require the ACT science section when you're applying to school there, then the ACT science section is not really as optional as it may seem. So this is something that we're gonna have to wait and see what the colleges are saying when they respond to these changes as well. We can't just say, hey, let's just wait until September 2025, and then from there we can automatically ignore the science section, because we don't know if colleges will actually go along with this whole science section optional change. And a lot of times you may not even want it to be optional. If you have a great science score, that's going to bring up the average of the rest of your test. And this is something that we're just going to have to wait and see and come up with the best strategy once we have more information and once we get closer to these changes actually being implemented. And then the third change that they're making to the test is that the math section will go from having 5 answer choices down to 4 answer choices. So all the other sections of the test, they're all multiple choice and they all have 4 answer choices per question. The math section is the only one that right now it has 5 answer choices per question. They're just bringing that down to match the rest of the test, and I guess make it a little bit easier to narrow down your answer choices or guess if you have to make a guess on that question. So again, not really a crazy change there, just a small little tweak to one of the sections. So overall, those are the 3 main little changes that the ACT is making, but more importantly, what's staying the same about this test? And first off, the ACT has come out and said this a bunch of times to try and clear this up as much as possible, but the material is staying the same. It's going to be the same types of questions, the same topics tested, and the same level of difficulty per question on average. And second, they've come out and said that the grading scale will be the exact same, the same 1 through 36 scale that we know and love. The only difference is that if you're not taking that optional science section, then your composite score will be calculated just based off of your math, reading, and English scores. And then the third thing that they've also said is for sure staying the same is super scoring. So they've said that there will be no changes to the way that they super score tests, so you can still use your best test scores across multiple different test dates, and you can combine those together to get your best overall super score. So what are the key takeaways here from what they're saying that they're changing and from what they're saying they're keeping the same? Well, in the transition period between April 2025 and September 2025, we'll just have more options. So we could take either test, depending on whichever one best fits your specific situation. And then after September of 2025, once the changes are finalized across all versions of the test, then the main takeaway is that we still, I think, have more options and more strategies to kind of personalize the test to best fit whatever your specific situation is. And so having a good strategy and a good plan will be the most important thing for you. Obviously, you'll definitely want to understand how colleges are looking at this whole optional science section thing. And maybe if the colleges that you're applying to don't care too much about science, but they'll look at it, if you have a good score, then you would want to really know what your score is on that section before you sign up to take the test. And so you would want to have a good baseline, a really good diagnostic and all of that, so that you can play to your strengths and kind of avoid some of your weaknesses. So if you have a really great science section, even if the schools are saying that the science section is optional, you would still definitely want to work on that section and show it off as a strength and use that to bring your overall average ACT score up. But on the other hand, if the science section is just something that you can't really wrap your mind around and you're really great at the other sections, you would probably just want to take the test without that science section and kind of hide that score away from colleges. And then the other thing is that we're going to have a little bit more time per question. I don't think that there was overall like a huge increase to the amount of time per question on any of the sections of the test, but we are going to be able to make just little small adjustments to the strategy approaching each section of the test with that little bit of extra time. And the next option that we now have is that we can take the test digitally, or we can take it on paper and pencil. And what I typically recommend to my students is always kind of taking the test on paper and pencil, unless there's some specific thing that's unique to your circumstances. But I think the vast majority of all students that I've ever seen, and I've worked with thousands of students, the vast majority of them really benefit from being able to underline things in the question and show their workout on the same paper that the question and that the passage are actually being written on. So if you're on the digital version of the test, then you do still have a scratch paper laying there on your desk, but the questions are up here on a computer screen, which means that you're not able to actually underline like on the computer screen where a specific important word or phrase is, or where an important part of a question is, or anything like that. And I think that's a little bit of a hindrance there. Now, on the flip side, from maybe the one or two students who don't see a great benefit from doing that, it could actually save a little bit of time per question to take the digital version, because you don't necessarily have to bubble in your answers like with the pencil and paper. You can just click on it with the mouse and then move on to the next question. So there are some pros and cons, but I'd say for the vast majority of students, there are going to be way more pros from the paper and pencil version. But again, it does just give you that option now to take the digital one or to take the paper and pencil one. So it's not like we're being forced into, one specific test like the SAT is giving everybody the digital version only. And on that point about the SAT, a lot of people were very frustrated when they rolled out their new digital version and they forced everybody to take the new updated version of the test. The ACT saw that and they really don't want to make the same mistake as the SAT. So they've said like 1,000 times now that the questions are not changing in difficulty. They're not testing different concepts. And overall, like the base core of the test is not changing at all. So what that means is that they're still going to be asking the same types of questions on the same topics that they've been asking for the last 35 years. And we're still going to be able to approach our preparation in the same exact way that we've always been able to do so, which is learning how to identify different question types on the ACT and learning the most efficient way of solving each and every one of those question types. So overall, the big takeaway in terms of the ACT changes is that we now just have a little bit more optionality in terms of tailoring a plan and tailoring a strategy to best fit your specific strengths and hide away your specific weaknesses. And I try not to give blanket recommendations to everybody because, everybody has a specific situation, but my general recommendations here are to take the paper and pencil test for as long as possible, all the way up through that September 2025 date, and not try and take the digital version that will be the new test, from that April 2025 to September 2025. A couple reasons for this. I think almost all students do better on paper and pencil because they can show their work. And for that transition period from April to September of next year, there will be a little bit of a new learning curve as they roll out the new test with the new format and everything. And if we have the option of taking the same exact test that's been out there forever, then let's go ahead and do that and let a couple of other people, be the guinea pigs for the new test. Even for students who call themselves maybe a little bit slower on the test taking side of things and feel like they want that advantage of the extra couple seconds per question, I would say that they didn't change the overall time per question by that much. And I think a lot of times what students don't necessarily realize is that they're not necessarily just inherently slow at taking tests. They're just lacking a little bit of the strategy and the best approaches to answering those questions as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So what I would say instead is if you have a great strategy for approaching each section of the test and you're learning how to recognize and solve questions efficiently, then you end up really not having to worry about time too much. Again, there are no real concerns about taking that new test even in the transition period, but I think that there are more benefits to taking the same version on paper and pencil even during that transition period from April to September. And so what should you do now with all this information? And what I would say is that pretty much nothing has changed. If you are in high school and you have taken the 3 math classes that you need to in order to actually take the ACT, which is Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry, then there's really no reason to delay taking the test any further. What you would want to do is just take a look at your calendar and figure out when you can really dedicate about an hour or hour and a half a day to ACT prep over the course of, somewhere between 4 and probably 8 weeks leading up to a specific test date. And so you would want to look at, your specific calendar, match that up with the ACT test dates that are upcoming, which as of now are October 2024, December 2024, and then in 2025 we have February, we have April, and then so on and so forth. Just look at your calendar, look at the ACT's calendar, and see what timing works best for you to dedicate yourself to that ACT prep. And there's no real benefit to waiting longer if you've already taken those 3 math classes. You want to leave yourself a little bit of margin for error, and so taking the test, sooner is always better than taking the test a little bit later. And if you're looking for some individualized help on how to, lay out the best plan for your specific situation and then following through with the best preparation tailored to your specific situation, then check out the description below this video. There should be some information on how you can get on a strategy call with me, and we can see if it's a good fit to lay out a plan for your specific situation. And if you want to see how I took my score from a 31 up to a perfect 36 and how I've consistently helped students get 4 or 5 point score improvements on the ACT, then check out the video that should be linked somewhere on the screen right here.